Welcome to the Employee Advocacy and Influence podcast. My name is Bradley Keenan and I am CEO and founder of DSMN8. And with me, I have Lewis Gray, who works in marketing, and I always forget his job title, but he's the big dog in marketing.
Yeah, every time these intros come along, I feel like there's going to be a jab thrown my way that I'm gonna have to bat away, or I'm going to get a promotion or something along those lines.
Well, you say that. So this is a really important episode because typically, obviously, when we started doing the podcast, I was doing it by myself. You came in, then you changed the photo on Spotify or the App Store, so it was me and you. And then this episode, you're going to kind of take the lead, which is really exciting, right? So I feel like when Obi-Wan Kenobi gave Luke Skywalker his lightsaber. So I'm going to grab my lightsaber and I'm going to hand it to you. This is for you, Lewis. Go ahead.
The fact I've got nothing to grab if I mimic it. I don't have a lightsaber my side.
You are the employee advocacy Jedi today.
We should have aligned ahead of time. I'd have just ordered a prop from Amazon. I could have passed it through
the screen. That would have been proper special effects.
Yeah.
So today's episode is going to be more of one of our workshop sessions. So we've done a couple now, had really good feedback from people because they essentially said they found it more tactics, so they could actually take these things and use them in their employee advocacy strategies. And I had a question from a customer, and the question was what everyone's talking about, which is the LinkedIn algorithm and how that's going to affect their employee advocacy efforts. So that got me thinking about, okay, well, what is the difference? And obviously we've looked at our data. So I've given Lewis the challenge to look at the algorithm, let's talk about it, and let's explore the impact that it's going to have, and ultimately what we can do to improve the reach of our employee advocacy social media posts.
Right, do you want to say the catchphrase today to launch the podcast?
Because the hand in the lightsaber. So you are going to do some episodes without me on it. So I think you should have done the intro today, and I should have done the catchphrase, which I've now forgotten, which is let's get into it. Is that what you're saying?
Perfect.
Okay, let's get into it.
Okay, so I thought a good place to start with this episode is just to explain or kind of build on what Brad's already said with why we decided to tackle this topic. So there's kind of two things really, and the changes to LinkedIn's algorithm have come at the kind of the perfect time for this podcast. So something that we often see when companies launch employee advocacy programs, at least in the infant stages, is when their admins are writing captions for their colleagues to use when they're sharing content, is they will either not put enough time into it to write a good caption, or it's not even or, sometimes it's and or, but the alternative is they'll basically write in a very corporate tone of voice. So what I mean by that is, if you think about if you were sharing something to your personal LinkedIn, if you're a marketer, for example, so a good example is I write content for DSMN8's LinkedIn. The tone of voice that I use for DSMN8's LinkedIn is obviously very different to my tone of voice when I'm writing for my own posts. And I think people kind of struggle to switch off their marketing brain in that regard. And they write posts that sound like, basically when their colleagues actually start sharing this content, it just looks like it's been written by somebody else. It looks like it was written by the marketing team. And it kind of looks like they've been told to share it, which is obviously a worst case scenario because it doesn't look engaging, but then it just removes that authenticity. So we're going to get onto that, and we're going to talk about how to write better posts. But then, obviously, like I said, this is very timely because LinkedIn's algorithm has recently gone through some pretty serious changes. Historically, we've been reluctant to kind of tackle anything algorithm related because, generally speaking, I don't want to use the phrase guesswork, but because there's a lot of research that's gone into people's algorithm theories in the past. But generally speaking, it's one of those things where, because it's constantly changing, and, you know, one piece of research will say the algorithm loves carousels right now, and then another piece of research will say it's all text posts. So we've tried to kind of steer clear of it and just when we have spoken about how to write LinkedIn posts, we've focused it more on keeping them engaging.
I think the interesting thing with the algorithm changes is like, so in my friend group, and my friend group, like my WhatsApp friend group, everyone in that group is into fitness in some way. And the argument I'm always having with them is they're always talking about macros and like this app and this thing they can get. But really, that's going to get them a very small marginal gain, right? The actual thing that's going to get them going is going out and exercising or running. Like going out and running is going to get you better at running. But some people will kind of focus so much on the algorithm or some kind of hack that they can get that will get them that much further. They're actually not doing the core thing, which is in this analogy is more write good content on LinkedIn. And actually a lot of the people that are complaining about the algorithm change are people who write very generic posts that are for everyone. So there's a huge community on LinkedIn, and I'm guilty of this as much as anyone, but writing posts which are about writing posts. So you've got copywriters and LinkedIn, I hate that term gurus, but the people who refer to themselves as the gurus. And it's just this kind of like closed network of people talking about LinkedIn, giving themselves boosts about content about LinkedIn. And they seem to be the people that are complaining the most about the algorithm changes. And when the client contacted me about what the impact would have or has had, I looked at our average click per share sort of 6 months prior to roundabout when the algorithm changes. I don't think we have a specific date of when it actually changed, but 6 months prior to roundabout that time, and then since then. And there was about I think it was like a 7% decrease in post reach after the algorithm change, which to me isn't statistically relevant because we're in July. So typically July would always see a dip anyway. And actually when I compared year on year, July to July, it was actually up 20%. So I haven't actually seen any impact of the algorithm changes because everybody who shares through DSMN8 is typically sharing, they're not sharing content about sharing content on LinkedIn, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I think that I've been guilty of doing what you were saying about before. So like the analogy that you used with the fitness thing, I've spent so much time in the past kind of trying to game the algorithm. And so like carousels obviously have been quite a big thing recently for LinkedIn. And I've spent so much time putting carousels together, which I'll do myself, but it's time taxing. And then I'll share it. And the reality is that I could have just shared a link with a decent caption and it probably would have done just as well as the carousel. But I've now lost a couple of hours of my time because I was trying to game the algorithm. But the difference between these algorithm changes and the ones that we've, I guess the difference between what's going on now and what's happened in the past is that this has come straight from the horse's mouth. So this is literally the editor-in-chief at LinkedIn and a director of product management have done an interview with Entrepreneur and come out and said that LinkedIn's algorithm has gone through some pretty major changes and this is what they are, which is so rare because obviously social media platforms don't really want you to know what the algorithm favors and what it prioritizes, because then everybody starts doing it and then you get into this cycle that we were just talking about.
Unless, of course, they actually want people to adhere to the strategy of the algorithm change. So typically algorithm changes are there to compress or suppress, reach, so people spend more money on ads. And there's obviously lots of theories around people saying, well, the algorithm change happened at the exact same time as personal post promotion. Don't necessarily, I'm sure they are connected in some way, but I think this is actually more to do with the general sentiment around people who are not in the, I don't say the inner circle, but like there's this group of people on LinkedIn, like the people who talk about LinkedIn, and it's kind of LinkedIn in itself is the focus, not the reach that you get from it. So I think a lot of outside people, when they go on LinkedIn, they just say LinkedIn's just people talking about LinkedIn. So what I want to see is things that are relevant to me, that are of interest, and LinkedIn know that if they don't solve that problem, people are just going to stop logging on because all they see is content that isn't of interest to them.
Yeah, I think that's why it's important that LinkedIn have come out and said this, actually, or why it's important this interview happened, is because a lot of people were starting to speculate that. Because, if you spend any amount of time on LinkedIn, you probably will have noticed a slight drop in impressions and engagements recently. There's definitely been a lot of conversations happening about it, but there's been speculation that's because LinkedIn is moving to more of a pay-to-play model So like you've just highlighted, like that's oftentimes that can be the reason for kind of throttling people's reach, is to get them to pay to achieve more reach further down the line. So I guess, yeah, you're right. It's important they've come out and said this because they want people to adhere to this so that people are actually sharing value. But that kind of leads me on to, I guess, do you know what? I guess it's important that we kind of summarize this. And I'm not going to read through the whole interview. I've just pulled together a few points that I think are the most valuable. But the reason that LinkedIn have come out and said they've made these huge algorithm changes, and interestingly, in the interview, something the editor-in-chief said is that they consider viral posts on LinkedIn to be a bad thing internally. So whenever they see LinkedIn posts blowing up and going viral, they look at it and think, okay, why has this happened? What kind of content is it that they're sharing? And they don't consider it to be a good thing. So they were basically explaining that during the pandemic, people's LinkedIn posts, and we will have all seen this, again, if you spend time on LinkedIn, people's LinkedIn posts became more personal. Work and home lives kind of became intertwined. As everybody started working from home, you started to see more selfies, work from home setups, and that kind of thing. And I think that just encouraged more users to lean into those actions that in the article they say it becomes endemic on social media, but people then start trying to game the algorithm because they realize these photos are going viral and that kind of thing. People start chasing likes and followers and that kind of thing. The downside to that is that, generally speaking, that's not why people go to LinkedIn. It's a professional platform. People go there to network, whether or not that's what you see in your feed anymore. People go there to network and to learn something. And, you know, generally speaking, they want to keep it professional. So LinkedIn users started complaining. I don't know what the official channels are to complain on LinkedIn, but I know, for example, you can go to a post and say this post isn't relevant to me. Don't show me posts like this. But the two people in this interview from LinkedIn said that users started complaining. So LinkedIn essentially took it upon themselves to try and make their feed more relevant and informative and not just, you know, addictive, engaging and sticky, which I'm all here for. I don't know how you feel about that, Brad, but for me, I hate seeing social media platforms lean into, you know, trying to meet this one-size-fits-all approach just to keep people using it. Because eventually they lose their way and people stop using it. I look at Twitter as an example.
Well, yeah, it's very, very topical at the moment. Have you signed up for Threads already?
I downloaded it this morning.
And what about Blue Sky? Have you registered?
I've never used Blue Sky. I've never...
So Blue Sky is Jack Dorsey's thing, which is the replacement for Twitter. So I don't think it's launched yet, but there's like a pre-registration thing. But yeah, I'm interested to see. I don't think it's a matter of if one of the platforms replaces Twitter. I just think it's a matter of what one. Yeah,
for sure.
But we'll I think we digress there, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, as far as like relevance in the feed is concerned, then yeah, I mean, the issue with Twitter and LinkedIn, especially if you've got a large following. So I don't have a large following. Probably by most people's standards I do, but not in the grand scheme of things. So I have about 12,000 connections on LinkedIn. Now, if I follow all 12,000 people and they just showed me everybody's posts in chronological order, most of the posts I would see in my feed would be completely not relevant to me because they're either people that connected to me to sell to me, people I sold to in the past, you know, previous people I'd worked with. So it would be a complete mess. So about a year ago, I went through an exercise and I basically just ran a script and unfollowed every single person I connected to on LinkedIn. So I unfollowed every single person. So my feed was empty, apart from promoted posts. And then I went through and systematically chose who are the people I want to follow. So, you know, clients, employees, you know, influencers, people who are of interest, and companies actually, because there are companies that I'm interested in what they're doing. And over time, that's actually now deteriorated to the point that I kind of need to do that exercise again. But that's not a problem for most people who have 500 connections, right? 500 connections. And if someone's only posting, you know, if 10% of those people are posting monthly, then that's not a problem. But when you get in the large numbers, it really does become, you know, far too much.
Yeah, definitely. I've just made a note to do that myself. Usually when you're talking, I'm taking notes because I want to speak about something.
It's really satisfying. So I shouldn't really promote people doing this, given that we want people to follow people. But it's not even a bot. It's literally just a web script you can run, and you can watch it doing it in real time. So it's just going unfollow, unfollow, unfollow. And there's something quite therapeutic around just seeing that go down. But then when you go through and reselect people, it does become a much cleaner environment. And some people I'll follow, but I won't connect to by using the bell thing.
Definitely, yeah. I don't think it's discouraging at all. I think we should, I'm going to keep my followers, but I want my feed to be full of people who are, whose content I consider to be relevant to me that I can engage with. It's a key part of social selling, right? It's just engaging with content that's relevant to you and engaging with other people in the industry. But yeah, sorry, I was just making note of that. But there's kind of two big changes that I guess you'll see in your LinkedIn feed now and again. This is coming straight from the source. So the first one is that it's now more likely that your followers will see your posts, and the posts that you see will be from people you actually follow, which again, I welcome. There's so many people that I follow currently whose posts I don't see. So if I see somebody on LinkedIn, I don't know them well enough to send a connection request, I'll just drop them a follow because I want to see more of their content. Oftentimes that content just never makes it to my feed, and it'll be these viral posts that LinkedIn thinks I want to see. So that's kind of the first big change, is it's now more likely your followers will actually see those posts. The second one, and I think this is the biggest one, especially with regards to what we're going to talk about in terms of employee advocacy captions, posts that share knowledge and advice, and that's a quote. So posts that share knowledge and advice are now prioritized throughout the platform. And LinkedIn has given us the framework of what they consider to be knowledge and advice. So they've not just told us what we should be posting, they've told us how to do it. So obviously this is absolute gold dust for us. What they consider to be a post that offers knowledge and advice is broken down into 4 different things. The first one is that it speaks to a distinct audience. So if you're posting, are you talking about marketing for marketers, or are you talking about sales topics that will obviously resonate with salespeople? Is the post speaking to a distinct audience?
I think it actually goes one step further than that. So I think one of the issues with, I don't know if it's specific to marketing, but when we talk about marketing, right, B2C marketing and B2B marketing, okay, some people would argue they're the same thing. They're completely not the same thing. There is such a different skill set in selling a product like a can of Pepsi versus selling cloud tech. Of course, there's going to be commonalities between them, but I think the distinct audience is even going to be I'm talking about marketing in the oil and gas industry, or I'm talking about sales in pharmaceuticals, and it gets very, very niche. So if I work in the pharmaceuticals industry, I'm seeing things that are actually relevant to me rather than kind of this blanket. You see, like sometimes I see posts on LinkedIn and they're so generic, and it's like, what am I even learning from that? It's like when you're in sales, you should really make sure you talk about all the features and benefits. Okay, cool. Thank you so much. So I think getting really specific is definitely going to help people.
Yeah, definitely. I've definitely seen a lot of that as well. Like as a salesperson, you should make phone calls every week. It's like, yeah, obviously. Yeah. Never that obvious, but you know what I mean.
Or everything's dead, isn't it?
ChatGPT's
dead.
Cold calling's dead. Cold calling's dead. That's the classic. But yeah, so the second thing, and obviously these are just broad statements. Again, it's coming from the source, but like Brad's just mentioned, there's going to be things here that you kind of have to read into a little bit more. So when you're thinking about writing to a distinct audience, you need to think about making it as niche as possible so that it's actually tailored to a distinct audience. But the second thing is the author writing in their core subject area? And this one I find so interesting because they gave us so much insight about what they consider that to be. So it's LinkedIn's algorithm, but they also use AI to determine whether or not somebody is speaking to their core subject area. So the example that's used in the article is probably the best one, which is a geology example. So for me as a marketer, if I started talking about geology, the algorithm and LinkedIn's AI, however it works, is essentially going to look at that and say, okay, you've never spoken about geology before. You don't have any track record in the field according to your previous job titles. Your skills on LinkedIn don't speak to that niche, so it makes no sense for you to be talking about it. Obviously, that's a very abstract example, if that's the right word, but I think that's the best way to explain it. But
I think it's there to avoid. I heard. Are you familiar with Scott Galloway?
I know the name. I feel like I know faces more on LinkedIn.
So he did the Diary of a CEO podcast. He's a famous kind of marketing lecturer. Disappointed that you don't know him, Lewis. But he refers to these things as idiot magnets. So like the idiot magnet was blockchain, was is now AI, and it's those people who are AI experts. But like 6 months ago, they were blockchain experts, or 2 years ago, they were blockchain experts, and then they were experts in something else. And I think the reason they're doing this is to avoid that thing of something comes out and everyone just repackages themselves as an expert in that thing and starts talking about it. And actually, all they know is the limited information that everyone has. They just use it because it's a buzzword that everyone wants to know about.
Yeah, definitely. I think you could probably get it with job hoppers as well, right? Because they're never really becoming an expert in any niche. So if you use me as the example, if I were to consider myself an employee advocacy expert today, and then tomorrow I went to go work for a logistics company, for example, suddenly I'll become an expert in that. But yeah, anyway, I digress. I'll just go through the 4 points. Sorry, we're on to the third. So this one, I don't want to hone in on this one too much for this episode because it doesn't really speak to what we're going to be talking about at the end. But nevertheless, how LinkedIn identifies if your post is knowledgeable and offering advice. The third thing is, does the post have meaningful comments? Now, obviously, we've known in the past that comments are super valuable to LinkedIn's algorithm.
Fire emoji by itself is the best comment, right? That's the one that gets you the most reach is a fire emoji.
And if you share 3, you get 3 times as much reach.
Excellent.
That's not true, obviously. But yeah, that's the best example. So people obviously caught on to the fact that comments were sending positive signals to LinkedIn's algorithm. Naturally, obviously, if a post is generating comments, the algorithm would have said, okay, this is interesting enough for other people to talk about. It means they care, so we'll show it to more people. What happened was, though, people caught on to this as marketers, and myself a marketer, I'm throwing no shots here, but people catch on to this kind of thing, and these engagement bubbles started to pop up where it's like, it could have been a Slack group, a Facebook group, but like groups of people would get together and say, when I post, I'm going to share it to this group, and everybody jumps in, they just start commenting, and the comments were essentially just comments for the sake of commenting. So the fire emoji, the great post, or love this, just stuff like that, where it's not a meaningful comment. You're not really adding anything. You're just boosting that content. And I think I've definitely seen this in the past where people have just said like commenting for the reach boost or something like that.
Yeah, people also write follow, don't they? But because they don't know that you can just click on the 3 dots and just say follow this post.
Sorry, people comment.
So people comment following. So what they by commenting following, they know that they will then receive notifications about future comments on that post. But you don't need to do that. You just click the button that says follow this post.
Oh, okay.
And then you'll be notified about the post. But yeah, I think that might be more of a Facebook thing. But
no, that feature drives me mad. If ever I like somebody's comment on a post, I then get about 20 LinkedIn notifications, especially if it's one that's gone viral, because just because I liked one comment, try and bring me back. But yeah, it's the algorithm is now prioritizing meaningful comments. So again, it's an indicator of it offering knowledge and advice because it starts actual conversations. The fourth one is that the post has a perspective. So Brad, this kind of touches on what you were speaking about earlier, with people just kind of stating the obvious. So LinkedIn's algorithm is now going to say, is this offering anything new? And obviously when you factor AI into this, you have to imagine what the capabilities are. Is this a statement that's been rehashed, thousands of times today? Is this something original? Are you actually offering a unique take, or are you just stating the obvious? So just to summarize those 4, and we've put together an acronym for it as well, but to summarize those 4, the post speaks to a distinct audience, you're writing to your core subject area, it has meaningful comments, and then you're offering a perspective. Again, the comments one, when we're talking about how to write a great post, doesn't really factor in. You can obviously encourage comments, but that's just what LinkedIn considers to be a knowledgeable post offers advice. The acronym that we've gone for is PACT. So that's
the acronym you've created. This is your acronym, Lewis. I'm not going to take credit for it.
Okay, just in case it's really badly received, you're
right.
I
just think that if you've created something, you should take full credit for it, and you've done it. So this is Lewis's acronym.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant you're like taking a step back, just in case like.
No. I'm not distancing myself from acronyms. I'm just saying, you've done it. You own it.
Okay. So yeah, it's PACT. So PACKD. So just like a trendy, startup name where you've missed a load of letters. Imagine that. The P is
There's no letters in there. You need no letters. Numbers, sorry. No, we need a number.
Yeah, there's no numbers.
We really
do need a number. So it's the P is perspective. So your post is offering perspective. A is advice. So you're offering advice. C, I've sort of confined this one a bit, but C is the core subject area. You're speaking to your core subject area. K, it always gets me with silent letters in acronyms because the K is for knowledge. And then the D is the distinct audience. So just things to bear in mind when you're writing posts, keep it packed. So just, what the algorithm's looking for. Hopefully just having that will mean that you can have something to refer back to when you're writing your posts. Lastly, and we will move on to how to write post captions for employee advocacy, but I think this is still super valuable because it does relate to employee advocacy, is they've essentially said what they think success should look like. And this, to me, all of these statements are just absolute gold dust for employee advocacy programs. And I think we should start to see a serious uplift as a result of, these algorithm changes, because they're saying that LinkedIn sees success as, instead of reaching lots of people, they want users to focus on reaching the right people. Obviously, with employee advocacy, you want your employees to become known as thought leaders in the industry. You want them to grow their personal brands. They're saying that no single discussion is relevant to every person across every team, just as no single piece of content should be relevant to everyone across LinkedIn. So essentially, they're saying that you're reaching the right people, and the people that you're sharing your content to or tailoring your content for are, I feel like I'm going in circles here, but people that content should in theory be relevant to. Does that make sense? Or have I?
No, that's 100%.
Okay, amazing. And then the quote, which I thought was brilliant. So they said, it's very rare for someone to stand up with a megaphone and shout to the whole office, and everyone's like, great, I want to hear more from this person yelling at us with a megaphone. Stuff's not going viral in the workplace, or if stuff isn't going viral in the workplace, it shouldn't be going viral on LinkedIn. So I think that sums it all up. Content isn't going to be relevant to everybody. Your content should be tailored so that it's relevant to the right people. And you, as somebody who's creating content, should be creating content that is relevant to your core subject area and that is going to be relevant to your audience.
So, Lewis, obviously we've covered loads in today's episode, and I'm noticing that we're already pretty much at the time limit we would normally put on a regular episode. So what I'm going to suggest that we do, and to give our audience a little bit of a break and to reflect on all of the information that we've given them, is split this episode into two. So this episode focusing very much on what the algorithm changes have been and potentially how they can impact employee advocacy. And in our next episode, we're going to be talking specifically about how we take those changes and we implement them in our employee advocacy program so we can get the most out of it. Does that work for you, Lewis?
That works for me, yeah. I think this is the issue when you let me speak. I just chat for 30 minutes and it could be 2 hours if we're not careful. So,
well, we're going to release these episodes at the same time. So if you are listening to this episode and you're enthralled with everything that we're speaking about, you'll be able to go straight into the second part of our algorithm special.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Do we want to summarize the bits that we've been through today?
I'm going to let you do that, Lewis.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I guess the main thing to take away from what we've spoken about so far is obviously taking into account everything we've mentioned about LinkedIn's algorithm changes. The summary is just to keep your posts packed. So, unique perspective. Is it offering advice? Are you speaking to your core audience? Are you actually offering something knowledgeable? And are you speaking to a distinct audience? So that for me would be the key takeaway. I think with all these algorithm changes, it's very easy to kind of read into one thing and try, we spoke about this earlier, to kind of go off in different tangents and try different things to try and game it. Just stick to the fundamentals, stick with what LinkedIn have told us are the essentials. And for now, obviously until the next big algorithm change, you should be all set.